Hi, good morning, Bardstown and Nelson County, and welcome to Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford with you again this morning. Good morning, Margie.
Good morning, Jim.
Well, today is our final candidate interview radio show.
Absolutely.
And we're looking forward to talking with our guest, Eric Shelburne, Democratic candidate for Nelson County Judge Executive, in just a moment. But we want to make an announcement about early voting and ID.
Yes.
Voting IDs.
Yes. Early voting, of course, is at the library Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and it's from 8 to 4. Voting, of course, requires a picture ID, so
Right.
be prepared. So when you go in for voting, that ID can be a driver's license, a military ID, or a college ID. Those are the 3 picture IDs that are acceptable. But if you don't happen to have one of those 3 IDs, you can request what is called a reasonable impediment declaration. Mm-hmm. And you can use, there are several things you can use. You can use a Social Security card. You can use any ID that's issued by a county in Kentucky, any state ID with a picture. You can use a credit card. You can use any food stamp ID card that shows your name. Also, if you get to vote and you have one of these IDs, but you're told that your name is not on the list to vote, they don't have you listed as a voter, mm-hmm. then you may request a provisional ballot. The law states that you are that you must be given a provisional ballot. That ballot will be, after you fill that ballot out, it will be put in a secure place, and then the election commission will check that against the rolls to make sure that whether you are or are not a registered voter. And if it turns out you are registered and your name was left off for some reason, then that vote will be counted for you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Margie. Well, I want to introduce our guest today, the guy in the hot seat today, Eric Shelburne, 5th District Magistrate Eric Shelburne, who's seeking the office of Judge Executive. And welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate you all having me on today. It's truly a public service that you guys do, so thank you for that.
Well, you've got the last bite at the apple, so to speak, before the election, and it's just days away now. I mean, early voting begins tomorrow. This has been a long road for you.
It absolutely has been a long road. Of course, the campaign is really driving, the engine's driving hard now. But honestly, ever since I filed, I've been trying to remain relevant even through the primary. Mm-hmm. Just been out visiting with a lot of people and talking to a lot of folks in Nelson County, which has been great as well. I mean, it's been an exhausting, but it's been a fantastic journey. Just the folks that I have had the opportunity to meet that I never would have had the opportunity to meet if I had not chosen to take this path. But so in 5 more days it'll be history.
Right. Well, Eric, I want to hit on this right away and get this out of the way. And I know this is kind of a burr under your saddle of being linked to Charles Booker through a photo and in your opponent's advertising. Now, explain the circumstances of how you were even at that event. This was not a Charles Booker event.
That's correct. No, it's unfortunate that in our local our local government races in Nelson County, it's sad to me to see that the negative campaigning and really the false and misinformation that has been spread through all sources of media, social media, and also through the mail. I would be lying to say that it doesn't affect a person emotionally, because those things aren't true about yourself, and it affects your family too, right? And I think it speaks volumes. I have, from the beginning of this campaign, I have made the commitment to run a campaign with integrity. I will not lie, and it's just not in me to get down in that level, in that dirt, and I think it goes to show how much I've grown in 4 years, how my temperament has been forged throughout this process. So I'm just giving it to the Lord. But no, I actually, they're one of those mailers. I'll tell you, they're quick to hit my trash can quick. And and one thing that's been very encouraging to me is that a lot of the folks I talk to realize this for what it is, these negative campaign ads, and that it's just an attempt to smear my character. And honestly, if my opponent chooses to talk about me instead of policy and issues and things that affect the county, then I feel like that he's in a desperate way, and would do anything to take advantage to win this election, which is worrisome to me as a voter. But to speak to there was a Democratic women's event that Booker had come to. It was not a fundraiser, and here's the thing that I have said from the beginning, from this campaign and my service, is this although this judge executive race is partisan, I don't really think it should be. I think that Nelson County needs to be represented as Nelson Countyans, and it plays well to some maybe to bring up those things, but I want to represent everyone. Those mailers didn't include a picture of me and Janine Hampton, the former lieutenant governor that served with Matt Bevin, and we had some great conversation. We got to talk. I didn't realize at the time she was a Desert Storm vet as well, and we got it. So really, it's unfortunate, these mailers that are coming out, and it seems to be daily. I know it's not cheap to send those mailers out. The amount of money that's being spent on this campaign of my opponents is alarming to me, because as a taxpayer, I would be very concerned about how he would manage money, the purse strings of everybody else's, because it is unreal when you spend $70,000 in the primary, and I'm quite sure it'll be over 100 before the end of this election.
Now, getting back to the Booker photo, now clearly you're not your policy. You're not a supporter of Booker's agenda.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Right.
All right. So there was no way, no ideological connection there. You just happened to be at the same event.
I happened to be at the same event, and it was. He had some things that he had spoke about that were they were some of the things that he had spoken about, and representing everyone equally from the hood. His saying is from the hood to the holler. Some of I think those things speak well to everyone.
Sure.
We need to observe all of our candidates and see what they have to offer on both sides of the aisle.
Well, speaking of policy, and how would you compare your decision making processes with that? And of course, you've watched Dean Watts operate in fiscal court over the last 4 years. What similarities or differences do you think there would be with an Eric Shelburne administration as judge executive?
Oh, well, I mean, first off, right off the bat, he's served for 29 years, and I mean, he can. I'm just amazed about how he really handles himself in fiscal court. So right off the jump street, we're gonna have to deal with me learning that role.
Right.
I think that he always had good even keel temperament, and he was he was a type of representative that tried to do what he could to help anybody he could, and I think those are similarities that I would like to bring back to the table as well. There's going to be a slight learning curve as far as how well he presents. I mean, you've been to a bunch of them, Jim. He's quite entertaining at times, even during some of those business meetings.
Right, and I, over the years, I've watched that the judge executive's office is as much a resource director. People come for help, and the judge executive is kind of the, who knows all the resources in the county and where they can go for help. And I mean, it's a great way to serve the community, in addition to county government. County government
right. Right. Well, and really, it's not much different than. It's a much larger platform. There's a lot more responsibilities, but a magistrate is kind of the same. The calls you get as a magistrate is very similar. I've got a problem with this, or I got a problem with my road, or I got a tree, and all of those things that you deal with in the trench. Right elbow to elbow with constituents. And that's separated from the major decisions that you make as far as decisions about future growth and future industrial growth, but it's on a much bigger scale. It's an opportunity to represent your county at the state level as well, which I think it's important to have the right temperament, and I think it's important to have the right communication and someone that can build relative relationships.
Speaking of our former county judge executives. Demeanor in court and in fiscal court and that kind of things. In all of the years that and I've known him for all of those years, once he was in office, you did not hear any partisan. There was no partisan. You couldn't tell if he was a Republican or a Democrat because he just didn't participate in political matters and didn't do that. And some of the recent advertising has given me great pause to think that we might have to listen as citizens that office might be used for political posturing. So let me ask you, would you pledge not to use your office if you're elected as a national political forum?
Yes, I would absolutely pledge to not use that office or that. I think that would be a misuse of that office. That office is specifically for the citizens of Nelson County, and it shouldn't matter which party you're in. It shouldn't matter which demographic you come from, or who you are, and everyone should have an equal seat at the table. It's concerning to me that we have a candidate that says, the only way that you'll get represented, if I'm paraphrasing, is to be a Republican, and we have to have a Republican to, because we got all these Republican representatives. But on the contrary, I have a very good relationship with a lot of those Republican representatives that we have at the state level. And, I think sometimes, too, that it can benefit, to have someone that has that capability to reach across the aisle of both, and just make good common sense and relationship decisions.
Eric, your opponent has been critical of the fact that outgoing Judge Executive Dean Watts pointed out in a presentation of 4 deputies that were underpaid in the sheriff's office. And I think he's been critical of the fact that nothing's been done since then. And so I just want to give you an opportunity, if what the fiscal court or what you as a magistrate, what your all's thoughts have been about, there's been no action taken that at least visible to the public. What your all's discussions have been about, addressing this. And obviously, I'm thinking, well, this is something for the next fiscal court to deal with. But it's been, several months will have passed. But you're getting hammered for it for inaction.
Right.
Is that so? What is there a general thought on what what that's going to look like, or what your
Right,
plan
right.
will be
And
for the next court.
And it's easy to sit on the sidelines and be critical of people that are serving, and it's especially easy to do that without any solutions whatsoever. I definitely am looking forward to being able to make that right. And I have seen there's about, at the time, if I'm not mistaken, that there was 3 or 4 deputies that were they were underpaid compared to what they were at Bardstown, and there's ground to be made there, right? And this is a process, and I think we have to work together, and it's going to be my intention as judge executive to get the sheriff's department to work with Raymond and and the whole department to make sure that it's not pay that we're talking about when folks are leaving the sheriff's department. And there's a couple of different things that I think would be a good way to proceed. And one of those would be the option of doing what Bardstown has done and try to hire more retired police officers, which saves you, you're paying $1.50 for every employee. It would save you in what you're paying. So that's basically, and I've spoken to the chief at Bardstown and the mayor as well about how they've really been able to increase their officers' pay is through doing that, reaching out to those retired officers, bringing them in, and what that saves them money on their retirement, and their it saves them money on their insurance, and they're able to take that money and roll it right back into their budget for extra pay and incentives. It's my goal to actually have an incentive pay, and I would like to do it for all departments actually, but when this first started to come as a problem, I didn't realize at the time, I do now, of course, that all the deputies get paid the same, and that was kind of how it was when I worked as a lineman. And it never really sat well with me as someone had been serving there for 16 years, and someone hiring with 4 years experience, but a topped out lineman that's right there close with you, besides the cost of living raises you may have received over those 16 years. And so I'm hoping to be able to have a incentive pay where that's based on a certain amount of time to keep those deputies, and actually we're doing that with the EMS now. I mean, we had the same problem with the EMS a few years back, and they instituted an incentive pay that gives you a reason to want to stick around, because when they took the defined benefit away from local governments, that took a huge carrot away for folks that were willing to hang around, good quality employees, because they knew after a certain amount of time they would be able to retire, do some other work. But that's not there anymore. It's a hybrid, 401k plan. So, you work at 27 years and you get to retire and still be young enough to do whatever you wanted and have a defined benefit. Well, that's no longer there. So now that puts us competing in the private market, which it's all about how much the pay is and the benefits.
Right. Now, the one thing the city did as well was they had a independent consultant come in to look at the police department pay. Well, not just that department, but throughout the city government. Would that be something that you would be interested in maybe having the court consider doing to evaluate everybody's pay? Yeah,
I think that would be I would entertain that idea. We'd have to do some evaluations on what those, who those firms are and
what it's going to cost.
And what it's going to cost. But, another thing that I thought would be a good idea is to kind of set a committee up on this, right? So, unfortunately, at the time when the sheriff was making an impassioned plea for his officers because of their pay, there seemed to be a disconnect between, as a magistrate, I was like, things aren't just lining up just correctly. So it seemed to be one source against one source. But what I think would make a good idea is to almost form a committee, and even not just this issue, but some other issues that folks are very interested in, and have a representative from that department perhaps, and a bipartisan group of magistrates, or and maybe even a citizen member involved with that, to just, so that they could see the numbers, and a mediator, a mediator to say, look, this, that way there is something more substantial that you can make a decision on.
Right.
Because it just didn't seem like everything was lining up with those. So, I think that would be important. And also, something I think would be important to do as judge executive is to have a exit interview. That would be, a time that you could get in private and be able to talk to someone to get in front of these problems.
Right.
Because, if you got a guy that comes to you and says, look, man, I've got the opportunity to go to work in Bullitt County or, E-Town for this much money, then that's something we need to talk about, before it becomes, what it has blown into.
Well, Eric is, if elected judge executive, and you're installed as judge executive, what have you given much thought as to any specific changes or things you want to consider doing? And I know that until you're in the big chair, you don't really have a true handle on all the moving parts.
Right.
And I understand that. But certainly you must have some things where you think there could be improvements or some things you'd like to take a closer look at if elected judge executive.
Yes, yeah, most definitely. I mean, I go to bed sleeping thinking about it, and I wake up thinking about it. So, yeah, I have some thoughts, and and one of those is, just like I talked about with the sheriff's pay, is having a committee or group to be able to take a 20,000 view look at what we're talking about, whatever that issue may be. Also, through my service as magistrate, I've been able to make some connections and relationships with different judge executives. And I've actually got to speak with Jerry Summers, and we've had some conversations at some of these conferences. I actually met with him about this a few weeks ago, to maybe being able to have a regional relationship with counties like they do up in Northern County, which is Kent, Campbell, and Boone County. And that opens them up to more resources, more grant money, because Nelson County, because we're doing so well, because our unemployment rate is so low and our median income is so high, that disqualifies us for certain kinds of grant money and stuff. But when you can go into a project regionally, it opens you up to, especially if you have a neighbor that's not faring quite as well, it opens you up to different money opportunities. And also you can bounce ideas back and forth, right?
This is the first time I've heard this mentioned.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I try not to talk about everything I want to do, because it seems like every time I talk about something, my opponent tries to claim it. So that's the reason I haven't really talked about it. So, but that's these are things that I've been discussing and things that I've been and in the process of doing over the past year and a half. But yeah, it would be a fantastic opportunity, at least something to dig into. And like if you're having troubles with, for instance, your road department may be having issues, and it also gives you a chance to, some information sharing to really tie us all together, and there's a lot of opportunities there.
I want to go back, and this goes back a ways, an incident in fiscal court where we saw the frustrated side of Eric Shelburne. And this was, and you know what I'm talking about too, when discussion came up about, I think it was the Pledge of Allegiance before saying that, and I think there was discussion between you and it was Don Thrasher, and you felt like he was questioning the way it came across was questioning your patriotism. And I know there were some words exchanged, and we saw a fiery side of Eric Shelburne, with who felt challenged, by the conversation. Is that are we going to see some of that again, you think, in fiscal court? I mean, that was just kind of one of those things that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I there had to be a lot of frustration there, and I think, I respect anybody who serves, especially, I respect your service to our country, and I think anybody that says anything that feels like it diminishes that they kind of deserve the strong feedback.
Well, yeah.
But we saw a side of Magistrate Shelburne that kind of was a surprise. But I think it indicated the passion you feel about your country and your patriotism.
Yeah, it's and those are things that are closest to my heart. I'd give my life for my country today. My faith, that's something that digs deep into my heart. I will say that incident, it was unfortunate, and I learned from that. That was a learning experience for me. I did not handle myself the best of ways, and I apologize for that. And I apologize to Don Thrasher for that. Even I did think at the time. So, I read those intentions as, and I'm glad he cleared this up, because he did write a letter to the Gazette, and and that was a healing moment for me. Because I have taken a lot of criticism about it through different, people that get on Facebook and just say things. But it was not a good display, and I think that through the negative ads I've been receiving, and which these attack ads are all false. Those are also hurtful to you, right? But I've built character through those experiences, and I think that the best approach is a measured approach. I have no problem saying the Pledge of Allegiance, my Lord. I'm an Eagle Scout. I can tell you every color on that flag, what it stands for. I was on a few color guards in the military. It's near and dear to my heart. And at the time, whether his intentions were to be a political wedge or not, that's the way that I viewed him. With that being said, I mean, we say it at all the conferences. We say it, at the Democratic meetings, and we say it, and it's not a problem. It was so, and I got a chance to speak to some high schoolers yesterday. And they asked me about, why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why am I running for office? Why am I running for judge executive? And, and I explained to them that I felt the need to serve. And I also explained to them that it's, that's a good question, because it's not what a person's doing, it's why they're doing it, right? And that always means so much to me. And I explained to them that, anytime you look at a candidate or even something you see somebody doing in life, or why are we doing, why are you doing what, why, the question was to the kids themselves, think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you feel called to serve, the intentions is just as important as the what.
Eric, your opponent in his ads keeps repeating the fact that you are going to raise taxes, that you are for raising taxes. What is your reply to that?
No, I'm not going to raise taxes. It's just another false attack unfortunately, by my opponent. And so it's easy. Don't get fooled by sound bites. It's easy to pull a segment of a debate, and you can kind of twist that the way you want. But when I was speaking at that time,
using it out of context,
using it completely out of context, and I would recommend that every voter watch every one of those debates, and they can make an assessment for themselves, not just what he's spoon-feeding them on mailers and on TV ads. It's very unfortunate. This is the thing I've said since I've started running, or since I started serving as magistrate, is, I have to be fiscally responsible with my own money. We live within the parameters of our budget and manage a small business. I can't spend my money frivolously, and so no way that I could spend someone else's money frivolously. Now, it's easy to cast aspersions. It's easy to cut sound bites in. But to me, it's just another sign of desperation, because he knows I've never really said that, but he still puts that out. That to me speaks volumes of character, and I think character matters, especially in this position.
Eric, and I asked Tim the same question I'll ask you. The county has two very qualified engineers, John and Brad. As the next judge executive, are you interested in keeping both those guys on board? Because when you look at the workload they're doing, it's like I don't know how you could get by without them both. Especially with John in the landfill design and Brad with everything else.
Right. And so the important job that those two engineers do, it would be impossible. I heard that there was some thoughts generated. I don't know where that conversation generated from, but John and Brad do an outstanding job. They have some really good guys that they manage their crews. They never complain. They work hard every day. They do the things behind the scenes that people do not see.
Right.
And those two engineers wear a lot of hats. And when I worked at the city, of course we had a civil engineer, and we had an electrical engineer and a cable engineer. If you'd have put all three of those positions together, you wouldn't have had anybody, because it's a lot. And those engineers, they do a lot. I liken Brad and John to the engineer that I served under at the city of Bardstown, Jeff Mills. And I'm telling you, he made the wheels turn on that place. And he could multitask and wear three different hats at one time.
Jeff.
And yes.
Yeah, he was amazing.
He's amazing. And Brad is just like that.
Yeah.
You want to be able to let those managers manage. And even with those two, when you have a big job, and just like we did at the city, if we had a big line we had to build, or a big conversion or something like that, now we had to bring in outside engineering groups, because they can't manage doing what they're doing day to day and do that. So if he's suggesting that we do combine those jobs, I think it would be devastating for the structure and the services of the county.
And I know that Judge Watts had kind of warned the future fiscal courts and judge executives that at some point the county expenses with the jail and EMS will eventually outstrip the county's revenue stream. Had any thoughts about, of course everybody wants to live in their means, but at what point do you have to look for new revenue versus trying to cut back or have savings? Is there? And of course, from everything I hear, we're nowhere near deciding. We're near that point right now. But you always have to look ahead.
Right.
And I'm sure that I don't know. I have tremendous respect for Rhonda Fenwick as the county treasurer for her grasp of county finances. But would you be more apt to look at services that fees could be adjusted on existing services? Any particular thoughts on that? Or that may be a discussion you would have to have with the next fiscal court on what they would feel would be acceptable as well.
So, my goal would be to maintain the model of good growth and tax base. That would be the ideal goal, is to expand the tax base. We've been fortunate that we have had a lot of growth, and that has allowed us to actually give a 7% raise to our employees last year, including the Sheriff's Department. If we can continue with that kind of growth, and so then hopefully we can avoid looking at raising. But that being said, services have to pay. You have to have, services have to be paid for. You cut services. It's not rocket science, right? So, I like the idea that fees pay for certain services, because the people that use those services pay for those services. Like our garbage service, it's set up structurally so we got one of the lowest rates in the state, and we're able to supply a lot of different services through that many areas in the state don't have. We have bulky item pickup through that. We have dead animal removal. We have a recycling program. We have a tire disposal. And, those are all things that, if they're managed correctly, and then that's what those guys do, is do a really good job managing those services, then, we should be able to maintain. Which, when we speak of growth, I just want to throw this in there really quick. We do have like a 3.5% unemployment rate. We do have a high median income, and a lot of those, and we're the gold standard of counties compared to a lot of counties in the state. A lot of counties want to be a lot like us.
They want to be Nelson County.
They want to be Nelson County. And, we have had some people that have served in the past and people that are serving now, which is, I just want to get to this point of the industrial revenue bonds that my opponent is so critical of.
Right.
At one point he says he's not for them, at one point he says he's for them. I think they're a good idea. And they're a good idea because they bring industry into the county.
Absolutely.
They bring good paying jobs into this county. And to say the fact, so he says, well, they've brought $500 million, past $500 million in 3.5 years. Now, I haven't really looked at those numbers, but if that, that I know that it is a high amount of numbers. I know we just passed a $135 million industrial revenue bond for Heaven Hills Distillery that was actually looking to go to Shelbyville. So somebody that doesn't recognize that we have to use every tool in the toolbox to keep those industries here, because really our economy near in Nelson County, it booms off these. I mean, the bourbon is our ace in the hole to some degree, and all these little downstream jobs are as well. Your construction, your truck driving, all of those. And he says, well, you've given up $9 million in tax revenue. Well, that's not. We weren't getting property taxes of $9 million with that. If that facility's not there, we're not getting that to begin with. If it's on a piece of agricultural ground, you're going to get about $300 an acre off of it. So really, the benefit of bringing those industries, keeping our small business, it's a benefit to the whole community. So I'm proud of those, and I'm really surprised he doubles down on that. Especially, I mean, what kind of conservative? I can't believe a conservative would not think giving tax breaks to direct industry was a good idea. It just would be on me.
Be run counter to what our whole county tries to do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hate to break up our conversation. We need to get some commercial breaks
All
in.
right.
And we'll be right back with more with our conversation with Eric Shelburne, Democratic candidate for Nelson County Judge Executive. Please stay tuned. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks here. We got about 10 minutes left in this morning's show, and our special guest in the hot seat is Eric Shelburne, Democratic candidate for Nelson County Judge Executive, and I dare say that's probably one of the most important political posts here in Nelson County, Eric.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
All right, Eric, we had a caller call in and was asking about your thoughts on changes or, planning and zoning. Of course, that's not an office directly under the judge executive. However, the fiscal court approves a certain number of appointments to the planning commission, and actually works pretty closely with not just fiscal court, but with all the cities and agencies in the county.
Yeah, so it's a complex issue. There is some changes that could be made to make it a much more user-friendly, efficient service. Also, and I do need to mention that all of the those folks that are volunteering on the planning commission do a really tough job, and for them it's public service for those folks and what they're doing. I do think planning and zoning is important. The structure of it is important. I think it when you go to other communities that don't have that structure, you can see the difference, and you can also look at their property valuations
Right.
and see the same thing. I mean, obviously, we don't want a $300,000 home in a single wide in the same subdivision, and that protects people's investments as well. But as far as making some of those changes, for instance, there is a little bit of a disconnect in the process of a building or doing some things, and part of that is, I don't want to say the lack of communication, but so that there needs to be a program that sets it up for the customer where it's an easier process, because there's a lot of frustration involved when you got somebody that wants to build something and then they go to planning and zoning and they say, well, have you gotten your site distance? Have you talked about putting your culvert in? Have you done it? And so they have to go in a lot of different areas. I mean, it's not very user friendly, and it's a necessary thing that we have, but there's also, I would also like to go through some, because, a lot of times I'll ask the director, I'll ask Jan, I'll say, Jan, well, I say, this guy's wanting to do this, you can't do this, and why not? And it doesn't make common sense to me. And she'll say, well, it's in our ordinances. If you want to do it, you have to change it. So there's some things that I would like to dig into to make some, bring in some maybe some common sense management to that makes it more customer friendly, user friendly, and all of those things. And it's interesting that the guy that I'm running against said, well, you never really talked about planning and zoning. Well, I've had a lot of calls as magistrate about planning. Not a lot. I've had some calls as a magistrate about planning and zoning. I've had my own issues when we tried to, or when we did, we developed over in Bloomfield for the spot where we live and we actually work at, and I was having a variance there, and so it was a learning curve for me, and it's interesting that a lot of those regulations and rules that we have in place now was because of the fiscal court that he served on. So I find it interesting that he tries to say, hey, I'm going to go in and just overhaul the planning and zoning when it was built partly by him in his 17 years of service 12 years ago.
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you about quickly, you served as chairman of the local planning committee back, I don't know, was that last year? Or early, it seems like a year ago. But and that process was to look at the future building needs, and actually was to facilitate a plan to end up with the middle school students on the high school campuses. Of course, that wasn't the purview of the committee. It was just to look at options. And I know you were chairman. And I took a couple of swings at you because I wasn't convinced of your leadership at that time. But you were. I could see the frustration because you felt that the process should be slowed down to gather more input, and this was on a train headed to the station.
Yeah.
And anyway, what you learned from that experience as chairman, because it didn't. I think you wanted to get more input, slow things down, and you kind of got run roughshot over. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't happen that way.
It did not happen that way. I think that any time you talk about a $60 million investment, which was that's what we were using. That was a Kentucky Department of Education formula that they used, right. and I think it's probably a little bit outdated. I think those numbers, especially with inflation, $60 million wouldn't touch those. I think any time that you talk about spending upwards of $60, $80, $100 million, I think it's a wise to look at all the options, and I'm going to take my time buying a vehicle, much less spending $60 million of taxpayers' money.
Right.
So, I think it's important that you look at all of the different, ideas, and you get a lot of input from folks that are living here and paying for those bills as well. But, it was a learning experience for me. I learned that sometimes it's difficult when you feel like you have a principle you need to stand by, and then you get run over with it. So it happened that way, and I recognize too that there's elected people that represent the school boards, and there's elected county officials, and those two streams typically don't mix. So,
Right.
I probably, although I wanted to do the right thing and was trying to do the right thing, it was. I think some folks that maybe get represented at the education level, that you thought that you stay in your lane, bro.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, as a citizen, that's what I felt like my duty was.
Right. Well, just as a note of irony, all of that is playing out in a large part in this election, because we've had candidates. It has really spurred additional candidates come out for school board race. So,
Yeah.
that sometimes it takes an issue to
Sure.
motivate people to run for office.
Yes.
All right. Well, we got about 2 minutes left, Eric. Anything else you'd like to leave with our listeners? I won't prick you with any more hot pokers over here.
No, I'll just say thank you again for having me here on the show. I appreciate the service that you bring to the county. It's important that folks know about these local issues. It's important that folks get involved. And like you said, it's good to see some people out running for those seats, and I'm glad to see that. I just would like to end with thanking everyone for their time. Like I said before, when I got into this journey, I didn't expect to meet all the people that I've met. I didn't get, to talk to folks and build relationships, and, just getting across Nelson County and realizing the connections that we all have together was fascinating to me from when I went from New Haven to Boston to Bloomfield. We are very interconnected people here in Nelson County, and we have some of the best people on the planet. I've been all over the world, and some of the best people I've met through my experiences in this has been meeting people right here in this county. I'm thankful for all the folks that have given me a piece of their time. Let me let them know why I'm running, and to give me that opportunity. And I'm grateful for the supporters, and I'm so thankful for the folks that just came out of the woodwork to volunteer for my campaign to help me. They saw what we were trying to do, and they've gotten with us, and I'm so thankful for the work that they've put in. I've got over 70 donors into my contribution. It's a true grassroots campaign. Some of these donations are $250 to $300, and it was a lot of money for those folks to do that, but it shows their commitment to me. Thank
All right,
you all.
we're out of time, Eric. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right.
WBRT Bardstown, 1320 AM, 97.1 FM, and on 94.9 FM in Lebanon.